Why do some of the greatest science fiction films ever made fail in their own time? The 1960s were filled with daring ideas, strange futures, and bold visions that audiences simply were not ready to accept. Yet these forgotten box office casualties became towering cult classics, each one aged like a prophecy waiting to be decoded. Today we revisit 13 60s sci-fi bombs that were secretly brilliant. Number 12. The Last Man on Earth, 1964. The Last Man on Earth arrived during a decade hungry for spectacle, yet this moody Vincent Price horror tale delivered something far quieter and far more unsettling. Audiences expected explosive action and triumphant heroism. Instead, they received a bleak meditation on loneliness, survival, and the fragility of humanity in a world gone silent. Upon release, the film underperformed and critics dismissed it as too slow, too grim, and too far removed from the energy of mainstream science fiction. Yet time revealed what early viewers had missed. The story follows a man who wanders a dead world hunted by vampiric creatures that echo the earliest concepts of modern zombies. Its stillness, its haunting atmosphere, and its relentless despair were not what 60s viewers wanted, but they became what later generations celebrated. The film began to surface on late-night television, where new audiences recognized its visionary tone and its influence on future apocalyptic cinema. George Romero himself drew inspiration from its themes when shaping Night of the Living Dead. Behind the scenes, the production faced low budgets and uncertain distribution, which further hurt its box office chances. The film was shot in Italy using limited resources, forcing the cast and crew to rely on mood and performance rather than large-scale effects. Ironically, that constraint became its greatest strength. The Last Man on Earth slowly transformed into a respected benchmark of atmospheric sci-fi horror. What once was dismissed now stands as a seminal milestone that helped define the modern apocalypse genre. Number 11. Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, 1969. Journey to the Far Side of the Sun promised cutting-edge spectacle, ambitious world-building, and a daring concept rooted in sinister parallel worlds. Yet its financial performance fell short, and audiences struggled to grasp its brain-bending narrative. The film followed two astronauts sent to explore a newly discovered planet located exactly opposite Earth on the other side of the Sun. When they arrive, reality fractures into strange mirrored distortions that defy logic. Early viewers found the pacing unconventional and the mystery too cerebral, which caused the film to sink at the box office. However, the legacy of the film grew stronger over time. Created by Jerry Anderson, the same visionary mind behind iconic television science fiction, the film carried a polished futuristic design that later critics recognized as decades ahead of its time. Its aesthetic influenced other alternate reality stories across film and television. Behind the scenes, the production was far more expensive than its studio expected, which worsened its financial loss and forced the film into obscurity for years. As home video and television syndication revived, interest fans discovered how bold the narrative truly was. The film embraced themes of identity illusion and existential fear long before these ideas became mainstream in science fiction storytelling. Journey to the Far Side of the Sun ultimately earned its cult following not through spectacle alone, but through its unsettling message that even familiar worlds may hide darker reflections. What began as a 60s bomb now stands as a smart and stylish gem for patient viewers. Number 10. The Projected Man, 1966. The Projected Man entered the 60s sci-fi landscape with an eerie promise of teleporter accidents, grotesque transformations, and a man torn apart by scientific ambition. Expectations were modest, yet even those were not met at the box office. Viewers overlooked the film and critics offered tepid reactions, noting its limited effects and modest scale. But underneath the simple exterior lay a compelling narrative about the dangers of unchecked experimentation. The story centers on a scientist who creates a device meant to transport matter across space. When the experiment goes wrong, he becomes horribly disfigured and gains destructive powers that he cannot control. This tragic blend of science fiction and body horror foreshadowed later classics that explored similar themes with far larger budgets. The slow burn pacing frustrated 60s audiences who preferred flashier adventures. Yet that pacing created a grim emotional weight that later viewers appreciated. Production difficulties added to the film's setbacks. A tight schedule and limited funding forced the filmmakers to work under constant pressure, and several scenes were reworked at the last minute. These challenges contributed to the uneven reception and ultimately led to its failure at the box office. Over time, however, genre fans embraced the film for its haunting atmosphere and thoughtful approach to fear. The Projected Man became a cult staple through late-night broadcasts and sci-fi retrospectives. Its imagery, its tragic hero, and its cautionary message earned renewed respect. Though ignored in its own era, the film now stands as a reminder that bold ideas can survive beyond disappointing numbers. Number 9. The Power, 1968. The Power arrived during a decade fascinated with psychic abilities and hidden human potential, yet its reception was muted and its box office performance disappointing. Audiences who expected a straightforward thriller were instead met with a surreal psychological journey filled with invisible forces, shifting realities, and a mysterious enemy who could bend the world with thought alone. The film was too strange, too experimental, and too bold for its release year. But time slowly revealed its brilliance. The story follows a group of researchers racing to uncover which one among them possesses a superhuman mind capable of manipulating matter. As paranoia spreads, the film shifts into a tense and atmospheric chase through distorted visions, looming shadows, and eerie soundscapes that heightened its themes of fear and suspicion. Early viewers found this approach confusing, but later fans recognized it as a precursor to more modern explorations of psychic power and psychological terror. Behind the scenes, the production faced significant pressure. The studio wanted a marketable sci-fi thriller, while the creative team pushed for deeper symbolism. That clash created a film too unconventional to succeed commercially. Its unusual effect sequences were expensive for the era, and the final cut blended noir energy with metaphysical horror, something 60s cinema audiences rarely embraced. Over the decades, The Power gained appreciation for its daring narrative and striking imagery. As television reruns introduced new viewers, its ideas found fresh resonance, especially in the growing wave of stories about weaponized minds and government paranoia. What once felt confusing became visionary. Today, The Power is remembered as a stylish, overlooked gem that dared to push 60s science fiction toward more cerebral territory long before the genre fully embraced its psychological side. Number 8. The Illustrated Man, 1969. The Illustrated Man was released with high hopes, yet it failed to attract audiences and was criticized for its unusual structure. Adapted from the imagination of Ray Bradbury, the film blended three separate futuristic tales connected through the tattoos of a haunted drifter. Viewers in the 60s struggled with its somber tone, its shifting narratives, and the dark philosophical path it followed. But over time, the film's maturity and ambition became clear. The film begins with a mysterious man whose tattoos seem alive, hinting at a cursed past. Each tattoo opens a window into a different world, revealing bleak futures filled with moral collapse, loss, and doomed attempts to escape fate. These stories were more reflective and emotionally heavy than typical sci-fi adventures of the era. That depth made the film difficult to market, and audiences expecting excitement instead found meditations on despair, fate, and responsibility. Production challenges further complicated its reception. The studio wanted a crowd-pleasing project, but the creative team pursued an atmospheric, dreamlike tone. The demands of adapting Bradbury stories stretched the budget, and the unusual pacing left early viewers uncertain. Critics dismissed it quickly, and the box office suffered. Yet, as years passed, The Illustrated Man found new life among science fiction enthusiasts who valued its haunting storytelling and poetic melancholy. Later generations appreciated its willingness to confront unsettling ideas about destiny and self-destruction. The film became a quiet cult classic, particularly among fans of literary science fiction. What the 60s rejected is now praised for emotional depth and bold imagination. Number 7. Seconds, 1966. Seconds was a catastrophic financial failure when it premiered, yet today it is celebrated as one of the most unsettling and visionary sci-fi thrillers of the entire decade. Audiences in the 60s were not prepared for its harsh examination of identity-body transformation and the price of second chances. The film told a story so bleak and psychologically invasive that moviegoers simply rejected it. But its daring ambition has since earned legendary status. The film follows an ordinary man trapped in a lifeless existence who receives an offer from a secret organization that can rebuild him as a new person with a new face and a new life. This transformation, however, comes with horrific consequences. The story dives into the terror of losing oneself even while gaining everything one once wanted. Its surreal imagery, disorienting camera work, and suffocating tension were far beyond what mainstream 60s cinema embraced. Behind the scenes, the production was turbulent. The creative team pushed for bold artistic choices, including distorted lenses, extreme close-ups, and nightmarish set pieces. These innovations were misunderstood at the time. Test screenings were disastrous, and critics were divided. The film box office collapse was so severe that it nearly damaged the careers of several key contributors. Yet time changed everything. As new generations discovered Seconds, they celebrated its fearless exploration of identity crisis and existential dread. Modern audiences hailed it as a psychological masterpiece and a precursor to body horror and cerebral sci-fi. What the 60s rejected, the future embraced. Today, Seconds stands as one of the most important cult classics of its era, proving that visionary storytelling sometimes arrives decades before viewers are ready to understand it. Number 6. Robinson Crusoe on Mars, 1964. Robinson Crusoe on Mars was promoted as an adventure-filled sci-fi spectacle, but its box office return was so poor that the studio quickly pulled support and moved on. Yet over time, this inventive survival tale became one of the most beloved cult gems of the 60s. It offered a grounded and imaginative portrayal of life on Mars long before realistic space survival stories captured the public imagination. The film follows an astronaut stranded on the Red Planet, forced to rely on ingenuity, improvisation, and sheer will to stay alive. Instead of flashy monsters or chaotic battles, the story focused on isolation, resourcefulness, and the struggle to adapt to an unknown world. This quieter, thoughtful approach confused audiences seeking more sensational thrills. That mismatch between expectation and execution contributed heavily to its initial financial failure. Production limitations also played a role. The film attempted ambitious visual concepts, using practical effects and stylized landscapes that were expensive and time-consuming. Budget constraints reduced the scale of several sequences, and the studio doubted the film's commercial appeal. Marketing campaigns were inconsistent, and the film disappeared quickly from theaters. But decades later, viewers embraced its sincerity, creativity, and scientific curiosity. Early home video releases and television broadcasts helped the film reach new audiences who admired its focus on human survival rather than spectacle. Many modern filmmakers consider it a key influence on the realistic space survival genre. What once was dismissed now stands as a charming, intelligent, and impressively crafted sci-fi classic well ahead of its time. Number 5. The Damned, 1963. The Damned was one of the most daring films produced by Hammer, yet it failed at the box office and remained obscure for years. Audiences in the 60s expected gothic thrills from the studio, but instead they encountered a grim science fiction nightmare about radioactive children, secret government experiments, and the cost of maintaining national security. The film defied expectations and paid the price for its ambition. The story centers on a gang leader, a troubled woman, and a scientist who uncover a hidden facility holding children raised in isolation because their bodies emit deadly radiation. These children represent both the future and humanity, doom as contact with them ensures death. The film combined social anxiety, nuclear fear, and moral questioning into a single disturbing narrative. This thematic heaviness pushed far beyond the comfort zone of typical genre fans. Behind the scenes, the production faced interference delays and re-edits that weakened its initial release. Distributors were uncertain how to market a film that mixed youth rebellion thriller elements and apocalyptic sci-fi. The final cut suffered from uneven promotion and limited screenings. Its financial performance reflected that confusion. Yet, once rediscovered, The Damned earned a reputation as one of the most intelligent and unsettling sci-fi films of the decade. Critics praised its haunting atmosphere, emotional weight, and courageous themes. Today, the film is celebrated for its boldness, proving that the most impactful stories often require time to be properly understood. What once failed now stands as a masterpiece of 60s paranoia and moral terror. Number 4. Barbarella, 1968. Barbarella promised audiences a wild cosmic fantasy, overflowing with spectacle imagination and sensual futuristic energy, yet it faltered at the box office, and critics dismissed it as style over substance. What viewers did not realize was that this psychedelic space odyssey would become one of the most influential cult films of the 20th century. Its daring visuals and surreal tone were too unconventional for mainstream 60s expectations, but perfect for future generations. The story follows a fearless space adventurer sent on a mission to stop a scientist whose new weapon threatens galactic stability. Along the way, she crosses bizarre planets, encounters strange machines, and discovers worlds driven by desire, technology, and chaos. This dreamlike journey abandoned traditional storytelling and embraced visual experimentation. That bold approach confused audiences who expected a straightforward adventure, but it later became a hallmark of the film's lasting impact. Behind the scenes, the production was ambitious and unpredictable. The filmmakers embraced imaginative set designs, elaborate costumes, and unconventional staging that pushed the boundaries of 60s sci-fi. These artistic risks increased costs and created a final product that no studio knew how to market effectively. The result was limited box office traction. Over time, however, Barbarella grew into a cultural touchstone, adored for its unapologetic creativity and fearless aesthetic. Musicians, fashion designers, and filmmakers drew inspiration from its vivid world-building and colorful strangeness. Once seen as a failure, it now stands as a rare example of a film that rewrote genre rules and anticipated the rise of pop art science fiction. What the 60s rejected, later generations fully embraced, turning Barbarella into an enduring symbol of imaginative cinema. Number 3. Fahrenheit 451, 1966. Fahrenheit 451 arrived with the prestige of a beloved source novel and the vision of an acclaimed director, yet audiences still avoided it, and the film struggled financially. Viewers who expected a dramatic blockbuster found instead a quiet, controlled, and deeply unsettling portrayal of a society where books are outlawed and critical thinking is forbidden. Its measured pacing and emotional coldness led early critics to call it distant, but the film was far ahead of its time. The story follows a fireman whose duty is to burn books and suppress knowledge. As he begins to question his role, he finds himself caught between loyalty to a rigid system and a growing desire for truth. The film's slow progression and stark visuals reflect the suffocating nature of this dystopian world. Instead of explosive action, it uses silence, repetition, and isolation to express the horror of censorship. This subtle approach clashed with the expectations of 60s audiences, leading to a tepid box office performance. Behind the scenes, the production faced technical challenges and disagreements about tone. The director pushed for an emotionally detached style to reflect the numbness of the film society, while the studio wanted something more accessible. The result was a film too bold for mainstream success. Yet its influence expanded over decades. Scholars, critics, and filmmakers later praised its haunting imagery and prophetic warnings. In an era more aware of media control and intellectual suppression, the EAE film message resonates more powerfully than ever. Fahrenheit 451 grew from misunderstood experiment to essential dystopian cinema, proving that box office numbers often fail to measure true artistic value. Number 2. Planet of the Apes, 1968. Planet of the Apes is remembered today as a monumental achievement in science fiction, yet its initial domestic box office fell short of the studio's massive expectations. It earned respect, but not the explosive financial success executives predicted. Only later did the film attain the legendary status it deserved. Its profound themes and groundbreaking makeup effects were too radical for early audiences who were accustomed to safer sci-fi storytelling. The film follows an astronaut crew who crash on a mysterious world where apes rule and humans are treated as primitive creatures. The journey explores power evolution fear and the collapse of civilization. Its unforgettable ending delivered one of the most shocking revelations in film history. Despite critical praise, the film's financial performance disappointed executives who had invested heavily in promotion and effects. Behind the scenes, the film was a battleground of ambition. Creating realistic ape characters required unprecedented technical innovation. Long hours, complex prosthetics, and experimental filmmaking pushed cast and crew to their limits. The studio worried about the mounting costs and questioned whether audiences would accept such a bizarre concept. When the film failed to meet projected revenue, it was labeled an underperformer. But as years passed, Planet of the Apes became a dominant cultural force. Its influence spread into literature, politics, television, and later major film franchises. Modern critics regard it as a visionary masterpiece that redefined cinematic allegory. What began as a risk that did not fully pay off financially transformed into a foundational text of science fiction. The 60s underestimated it, but future generations recognized its brilliance. Number 1. 2001, A Space Odyssey. 1968. 2001, A Space Odyssey is celebrated today as the greatest science fiction film ever made, yet upon release it baffled general audiences and struggled financially during its initial run. Viewers walked out of theaters confused by its slow-pacing, cryptic symbolism and abstract ending. Critics were divided, and the studio worried that the film ambition had exceeded what the 60s movie-going public could accept. But that ambition would soon reshape the entire genre. The story follows humanity evolution through a series of haunting chapters. A mysterious monolith influences early ancestors. A mission to Jupiter uncovers a hidden truth. A sentient machine begins to defy its creators. The film moves with hypnotic slowness, building atmosphere through silence images and cosmic wonder. This meditative approach contrasted sharply with the action-driven structure audiences expected. The lack of traditional storytelling caused the film to underperform at first, and some theaters even pulled it from schedules. Behind the scenes, the production was a monumental challenge. The director pushed for scientific accuracy, visual innovation, and philosophical depth. Practical effects were pushed to unprecedented limits, creating visuals that still astonish decades later. The studio became nervous as costs rose and early reactions were negative. But younger audiences slowly discovered the film through special screenings, where its immersive experience resonated powerfully. Over time, 2001, A Space Odyssey grew into a towering masterpiece, recognized for its visionary scope and technical brilliance. It redefined science fiction as a platform for ideas rather than mere spectacle. Its influence can be traced across generations of filmmakers who drew inspiration from its boldness. What began as a misunderstood experiment became a monumental landmark, proving that true greatness often takes time to reveal itself. These 13 sci-fi films were dismissed in their own era, yet they refused to fade away. Each one carried ideas too bold for 60s audiences, and each one found new life when the world finally caught up. Their journeys remind us that a box office number never defines artistic value. What matters is the legacy left behind and the stories that survive long after the spotlight fades.